Namaste, teacher.
Namaste.
Namaste, teacher.
Namaste, both of you. How are you in Colombia?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are great. We are starting our day. For you, it's ending.
Yeah,
but it's okay.
towards the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation after some time ago back. It has been a long for us. It has been a long time, and also thank you for allow us to have this conversation, even if it's a little late for you in the evening.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
We are going to do today. We will try to be very practical in the translations because we have, of course, Spanish speakers audience, but well, we will see how is it going. So thank you very much.
So please be patient, teacher, and also the audience during our translation. We will
So
try
far,
to do
the
the
people
best.
who are saying namaste are all non-Spanish.
Yeah, at the moment, yes. So I think we will keep it for now. We will try to keep it in English, and we will see. So who else is joining? Please let us know who is in the joining us. Please leave a message in the chat box. Namaste Aurelie, namaste Niraj, namaste Amanda, hola Angelita, buenos días. Muchas gracias por estar aquí, muchas gracias por unirse a esta conversación que hace un tiempo no teníamos con el maestro. Y bueno, pues aquí vamos a hablar sobre un tema muy interesante. We are talking about Ashtanga Yoga from the teachings of Maharishi Patanjali, of course, our inspiration in the Vini Yoga tradition, and we are very fortunate to have Dr. Kaustubh Desikachar joining us. Is also we consider now our teacher, although we are not met in person yet, but we consider our teacher now. Muchos saludos desde El Salvador, Rolando, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Niraj from India, Aurelie from Bélgica, Belgium. Oh, buenos días, Amanda. Buenos días from Belgium. Muchas gracias. So, thanks so much again for being here. Please let us know who is in the chat. And you can also participate with your commentaries, with your questions for the teacher, and we will try to make the conversation more dynamic.
And interactive, of course.
So, teacher, if you can please honor us with...
You can present teacher first.
With chanting. Well, of course, I will do a little presentation. The Dr. Kaustubh Desikachar is the successor of the lineage of the classical Vini Yoga tradition of the very famous teacher T. Krishnamacharya, and his son and Dr. Kaustubh's father, TKV Desikachar, is a famous and acclaimed yoga teacher, healer, therapist, and spiritual advisor. His objectives include the sharing of the authentic teachings of yoga in the modern era, as also building bridges between the different healing modalities to promote physical, emotional, social, and spiritual health. Entonces, pues, el profesor Kaustubh Desikachar es el sucesor y quien mantiene en este momento el linaje de la tradición Vini Yoga del famoso maestro de yoga T. Krishnamacharya y su hijo, a la vez el padre del profesor Kaustubh, TKV Desikachar. Es un profesor aclamado y reconocido en todo el mundo, yoga terapeuta de yoga, consejero espiritual también. Sus objetivos está transmitir la auténtica tradición del yoga en este linaje del Vini Yoga en la era moderna y construir esos puentes entre las diferentes maneras de sanación que promueven bienestar físico, bienestar emocional, bienestar social y salud también, por supuesto, espiritual. Entonces, bienvenidos a todos. Rolando, muchas gracias. Gabriela, de Italia, creo que puedes entender español, espero. Entonces, haremos preguntas en inglés y en español para el maestro y, bueno, bienvenidos todos. Voy a pedir al profe que haga un pequeño canto para abrir nuestra sesión. So, please, teacher, if you can please honor us with a chanting, if you like.
Shanno Mitra Shamvaruna Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brahaspatihi Shanno Vishnururokramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ratam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmam Avato Tadvaktaram Avato Avato Mam Avato Vaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Beautiful chant. Thank you so much, teacher.
Namaste.
Namaste. Well, we go then with the first question. And it is fascinating, the permanence over the time of the tools described by Maharishi Patanjali as Ashtanga Yoga. But does this knowledge comes from previous Vedic text? And why were arranged in that particular order?
Bueno, es fascinante cómo permanece en el tiempo las herramientas descritas por el sabio Patanjali, Maharishi Patanjali, en el modelo Ashtanga Yoga. Pero este conocimiento viene de algún texto védico previo, y por qué están estas herramientas organizadas en ese orden particular.
Well, I am not so sure because I don't know all the texts that are coming from India, because we have millions of texts. And also the problem with many of these texts in India is we don't know exactly which came first and which came next. However, from what we can call our Purvacharyas, that means our previous ancestral teachers, whenever they refer to the Ashtanga, it's always referred to as Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga. Therefore, it is very logical to conclude that perhaps Patanjali was the first one to compile this list of 8 practices, even though small parts of these are presented even in ancient Vedic texts. Like, for example, the Taittiriya Upanishad. It talks about certain kind of ethical principles, like what we would call as yama and niyama in the Ashtanga Yoga. The Taittiriya Upanishad talks about this. Vedamanocyacharyo ante vasinamanushaasti satyam vada dharmanchara swadhyayanma pramadaha acharya priyan dhanamahritya prajatantum ma vyavachhetsi, etc. It goes on like that, where certain very important ethical principles, moral principles, guidelines like that are definitely talked about. However, because it is always called as Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, it is probable that it is something that is coming from Maharishi Patanjali. It is possible that it is coming from Maharishi Patanjali. And therefore, we can assume that Patanjali was the first compiler of the Ashtanga Yoga. Even though there are certain debates about who is older, etc., because there is an even older text that is called as Yoga Yajnavalkya. Some people say it's older than Maharishi Patanjali. Some people say it is not older. Maharishi Patanjali is older, because Yajnavalkya also talks about the Ashtanga Yoga in that same order. So, in a certain way, it's kind of Patanjali is acknowledged as the creator of this. The permanence of this is fascinating because it really shows how we as human beings are so stupid. Because
Can I translate that, teacher?
please.
Bueno, el profesor se refería a este modelo de Ashtanga como en sus orígenes, que no es muy seguro su origen, pero viene de muchos textos que el sabio Patanjali los compiló. Y se dice que Patanjali sería como la persona, digamos, que se ha tomado, digamos, de quien se ha tomado más bien este conocimiento. Siempre los ancestros se referían a Patanjali, por eso Patanjali es, digamos, como la persona quien tomó este conocimiento de Ashtanga Yoga. Puede definirse de esa forma, aunque el origen es muy difícil de encontrar. Porque se presentaron en textos védicos como Taittiriya Upanishads, donde están los yamas y los niyamas, principios éticos. Entonces, en resumen, también digamos que Patanjali fue como el compilador de Ashtanga Yoga y es a él al quien se refiere en general para quienes estudiamos yoga. También existía otro maestro, Yajnavalkya, que también contemporáneamente puede pensarse que estuvo en esa época con Patanjali, es algo que se discute, pero que también se presentaban a través de este texto de Yajnavalkya. Please go ahead, teacher, with the permanence.
And the stupidity of human beings.
The permanence of this actually reveals how stupid we are as a human being, because if these teachings of Maharishi Patanjali has been relevant 3,500 years ago as a way to reduce our suffering and come out of suffering, and if it is still relevant today, the important, interesting question is, what have we learned as humanity? What have we learned as a humanity? Because it looks like the teachings now are more relevant than it was before, because we have certainly much more problems, much more dukkha now than before. And I think we have much more need for the yamas and niyamas and the Ashtanga Yoga today than perhaps 3,500 years ago. And that is why it's a very pertinent question to ask for each of us. why we are so stupid in learning something that is so fundamental and so precious. So this is that part about the permanence of these teachings.
El profe habla que pues estas enseñanzas, incluso desde hace más de 3.500 años, que fue cuando Maharishi Patanjali las expuso, continúan siendo relevantes porque pues desgraciadamente como seres humanos continuamos en un estado de estupidez, digamos, y no hemos aprendido mucho durante todos estos años. Y por lo tanto estas enseñanzas continúan siendo relevantes incluso más ahora que hace 2.000 o 3.500 años. Las enseñanzas nos ayudan a la reducción del sufrimiento, es uno de los principios, y debemos aprender acerca de ellas más, incluso ahora que tenemos tantos problemas, tantas distracciones. Como seres humanos, parece que no hemos realmente avanzado mucho. ¿Vas a decir algo más?
And one part of the question that you asked me was about why this particular order. And I think the order is both not only logical in the way of evolution, but also it's chronological in the way of teaching. Because when you look at the yama and niyama, they are the foundation of the other six. If the yama and niyama are not in place, the other six angas will definitely not work.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the yama and niyamas were taught much earlier than, let's say, the asana or pranayama or pratyahara or dharana, dhyanam, samadhi, etc. Because when you think about it, asanas were not really begun to be taught to the young people until they were of a certain age, like 8 years old or maybe 9 years old, etc. When they had what is called the Upanayanam, the thread ceremony, and then after that, they could start practicing the asanas because that was part of the teaching. And but the yama and niyama was probably initiated much younger. For example, when we are still infants, like if you imagine there is a small child of 2 years old or 3 years old, and it is poking the eye of its younger brother who is 1 year old, the mother immediately says, "Hey, don't do that, don't be violent." So in a certain way, she is teaching the child ahimsa. Mm-hmm. And the child goes, "No, mother, I didn't do anything." And the mother says, "Don't lie. There is satya," etc. So, and if it's taking away the food or the toy of its brother or sister, they are taught, they don't steal it, asteya, etc. So, in a chronological order as well, even when the child is a bit older, when it's dirty, mother and father will tell, "Don't be so dirty, clean yourself," etc. They were taught much earlier than asana practices.
Wow, interesting.
Asana practices were taught almost always before pranayama practices, because where are you doing the pranayama? In an asana. Mm-hmm. Therefore, pranayama was a natural consequence of asana practice. So, asana and pranayama were taught when we were young, when we were about 8-9 years old. The asanas were introduced, and a few years later, pranayama was introduced. The more serious pranayama practices were introduced when we were teenagers, although some very simple pranayamas were taught when we were still younger. When the thread ceremony already happened at around 8 years, we were taught Nadi Shodhana, etc. But more complicated pranayama, more complicated practices like bandhas, etc., were taught much later when we were teenagers, because the body had to be of a certain strength and vitality in order for the person to be able to practice this. And it is that time when also when the body and the senses are growing into a what you call a vital state, that certain practices like pratyahara, dharana, dhyanam, samadhi were taught, because they were a little bit more sophisticated practices that involve the discipline of senses, that involve the discipline of mind, which is something that comes later, because when we are young, sensory exploration is natural. So we cannot teach pratyahara at that time when sensory exploration is the natural part of the process. The young person, a young child, has to enjoy sensual pleasures to know that sensual pleasure is not the ultimate. How can somebody who has not enjoyed the sensual pleasure let go of that and know the value of letting go? That's why letting go something after you have experienced it is much more powerful. And that is why pratyahara, dharana, dhyanam were also things that were taught later when the person was a bit more older. Although the seeds of all these practices existed in earlier stages of life, the peak of these practices were not taught until bit later. So in a chronological manner also, the Ashtanga Yoga makes sense. At the same time, in terms of a progression in the sequence of practice also, it makes sense. And so that is why it has been presented in this particular order. And I think it is the most amazing order that you can imagine. And as I said, great Maharishis like Patanjali and great Maharishis like Yajnavalkya have accepted this order. And I think it means that there's something fascinating about it, and it's logical, it's rational.
Yes, definitely, teacher. I never thought from that point of view. Thank you so much for that insight. It's very interesting. I will say hello to some friends. Sarah, thank you for being here from England. Katia, shalom from Israel. Very nice to see you here. Hola, Leonardo. Muchas gracias por estar aquí en esta charla. Qué agradable verte acompañándonos hoy.
Yes, teacher, and also I want to say that that answer it comes from your own experience, because you grew up in a family with this immersed in this tradition. So that makes more sense for us that we are listening about this comparison of the chronological. So yeah, beautiful.
It's why I feel in the modern era it becomes difficult for many people to embrace the yama and the niyamas and accept this order, because many people in the modern era come to yoga as adults, where certain frameworks of living has already been established, and therefore to reverse that, it's not easy. So that's why there is a struggle to embrace the yama and the niyama today. And and we have moved from realism to an era where now truth is not really valued. It is only an opinion that is considered. What we call, we are living in the era of the post-truth, where the truth does not matter anymore, where people can just think about whatever they want and assume that that is what is the reality, which is completely against the concept of satyam, which is reality. So that's why we also struggle, because we are living in an era of post-truth, where reality no more matters.
Okay.
Gracias, Carmen, por estar aquí. Por supuesto, vamos a hacer la traducción.
Sí, entonces el profesor Kaustup respondía que por qué está en un cierto orden los conceptos de Ashtanga Yoga. Y él empezó hablándonos acerca de cómo desde la infancia a un niño se le empiezan a tener ciertos comportamientos morales o éticos. Entonces ahí vienen los yamas. Entonces él hacía una referencia a que cuando un niño digamos, toca el ojo de otro niño, es un acto de violencia. Entonces viene un proceso de educación y así de forma progresiva, pues se van ordenando estos comportamientos humanos desde la infancia. Eso es como un poco a la referencia a los llamas y ni llamas. Luego a una edad mucho más, digamos, avanzada, pero aún siendo un infante, pues vienen los siguientes componentes de Ashtanga Yoga. Y la asana también viene un poco más en la adolescencia. Y así en la madurez va llegando un poco lo del pratyahara y las técnicas de meditación, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Pero todo es un progreso a través del crecimiento del ser humano. Y lo otro que el profesor mencionaba es que cada uno va fundamentando el siguiente. Por eso hay un orden cronológico, porque cada uno va fundamentando el que sigue. Y lo otro que nos pareció muy interesante en su respuesta es, lo perdí, se me olvidó. Bueno, si lo recuerdo ahora, me disculpan, por favor. Bueno, sí, disculpen. Decía el profesor que lo que sucede hoy en día es que muchas personas llegan al yoga a una edad más madura. Entonces se van perdiendo las conexiones de fundamentación del yoga y eso hace que sea más difícil para un practicante. Well, thank you so much again, teacher. I had to do this translation and I got lost a little bit, but I could handle it.
Okay,
So,
I don't know where you got lost because I don't know so much Spanish. So,
but thank you for your patience. So let's move.
I will do the next question first in Spanish, so people can be prepared for that, and then we will do in English. La siguiente pregunta es la tradición o el acercamiento de la tradición Vini Yoga toma cada aspecto de Ashtanga Yoga, de estos 8 pasos, con la misma importancia, pero no hay duda que hoy en día el más popular es el asana, ¿sí? ¿Por qué? Le vamos a preguntar al profe por qué piensa que ese es el motivo, cuál es la razón de por qué el asana es hoy en día la más popular. So teacher, the Vini Yoga tradition approach every part of Ashtanga Yoga with the same importance. There is no doubt that the most popular tool today is asana. Why do you think is that the reason?
Or the motive?
well, I think there are maybe 2 dimensions which are very, very relevant to this topic. The first one is what I would call as lost in transmission. So when you see much of the modern yoga that has been taught in the Western world or in the global world now, they are very often coming from students like of Krishnamacharya, like B.K. Iyengar, Sri Patabi Joyce, and maybe some other teachers from North India who learned only asanas from their teacher. And therefore, that is what they could transmit. I often tell this, like when Patabi Joyce and B.K. Iyengar were students of Krishnamacharya, they studied with him for 1 or 2 years, maximum, not longer. And then there was a physical separation that happened because they had to move away from their teacher's location. In those days, travel was not easy. And there was no internet or online classes and things like that. Therefore, they stayed with what they learned and transmitted what they learned in the best way that they could. And therefore, much of the yoga was focused on asana practices. The other part of this is that many people in the modern era who came to yoga could relate very well with asanas, especially because many people in the Western world that embraced yoga much stronger than perhaps Indians in the 1960s and 70s were all people who were interested in sport as well. In Western countries, sport is very, very popular, especially in those days already. Sport in India in the 70s, 60s, and 70s was very insignificant. It's only now in the last 20, 30 years because of cricket we have sport. And in India, for until recently, sport meant cricket and nothing more. It's only now that we are venturing into other forms of sport as well, which is wonderful. So the people could relate with something which is very physical because asana came like a sport. That is why in many, many countries, for example, when you look at England, for example, the British Wheel of Yoga is recognized by the sport ministry. Many, many organizations established yoga through the sport dimension. And that is why people are much more easily relating with asana practices because they look at it as a replacement for sport, perhaps a safer replacement, but not necessarily safer, but perhaps in their minds it is a more safer replacement, and that is why they venture into asana practices. And the problem also is that once you create an identity with something, and this is where we talked about the era of post-truth, once you develop an attachment or an identity to something, it's difficult for you to change your view. So when you practice yoga as asana for so long, and somebody comes and tells you, no, 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 that's not yoga. Yoga is something beyond that. They don't want to hear the truth. Therefore, there is a resistance. So they
Ya, bueno, lo que habla el profe aquí es que hablando sobre por qué el asana es, o las posturas es hoy en día lo más popular, especialmente en el occidente, es porque hay como una pérdida de la transmisión del yoga original. Muy a menudo aprendemos, bueno, los estilos hoy en día más populares son, por ejemplo, de Patabi Joyce, de Vikadesa Iyengar, y ellos fueron estudiantes de Krishnamacharya, el abuelo aquí del profe Kaustup, pero aprendieron esencialmente la parte de asana con él, porque estudiaron por un corto periodo de tiempo, unos 2 o 3 años, nada más. Entonces se enfocaron más en la parte de asana y a su vez ellos empezaron a transmitir esta enseñanza o esta herramienta del yoga del asana de la mejor manera, por supuesto, que ellos pudieron hacerlo.
También del norte de India.
Y también, por supuesto, por profesores del norte de India que estaban más enfocados en la parte de asana. Y por eso muchas personas hoy en día se relacionan solamente con la herramienta del asana en el yoga, porque se hizo muy popular en los años 60, en los 70, porque en Occidente había un crecimiento muy grande del interés por el deporte, por las prácticas deportivas, mientras que en India en ese momento no era importante o no era algo interesante el deporte. Apenas después empezó a haber un interés por el deporte, por el cricket, y pues ahora hoy en día también se han aventurado a otras disciplinas deportivas. Pero realmente en Occidente incluso hay organizaciones que hablan, pues que se enfocan en el deporte e incluyen el yoga dentro de su organización como una práctica deportiva. Entonces, no como una práctica espiritual, y por eso estamos muy relacionados con la parte física. Otra cosa que dice el maestro es que cuando ya muchas personas han iniciado una práctica de yoga muy enfocada en la parte física, en el asana, es muy difícil cambiar esa manera de verlo, ¿sí? Es muy difícil que venga otro profesor y te diga, no, eso que estás haciendo de solo posturas no es yoga, es mucho más que eso. Y para las personas, pues no es fácil admitir, digamos, esa realidad.
Sí, porque hay una resistencia a cambiar, a aceptar que lo que se hace pues, no es lo apropiado. Please, teacher.
And then there is the circumstance, or what is called, I would call as circumstantial reasons. What happens when such young people from the West are interested in sport kind of activity? They are meeting those teachers who only know asana practices, And then there is the development of a loyalty between them. These students, they come to these teachers year after year because they are very loyal, which is very, very admirable. And therefore, it creates a circumstance that they are learning the same thing, asanas, again and again. And they are somehow becoming, they start to feel that they are investing so much of their life, of their energy, of their money into these kind of yoga practices. And then somebody else comes and says, well, there is much, much more bigger aspects of yoga than asana. It's like, no way. I've invested 20 years of my life in this, and you're telling me that there is not of value because asana is only so little. And that creates this other problem as well. So I think there are historical reasons, there are circumstantial reasons, and that is why we have this situation. But the beauty about our society is that society is not fixed. It's always an evolution. So there is now students from around the world who are open, who have access to information much more easily than before, where they already hear earlier in their life that there is something that is beyond asana practice. And so hopefully in another 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there may be a shift in consciousness about what yoga is, and that is the best thing we can hope for. If not now, it's perhaps something that will happen in the future.
Otra respuesta del profesor acerca de este aspecto. Entonces él se refiere mucho a cómo se ha creado un lazo entre un profesor y el estudiante desde ese entendimiento de la parte física, y eso hace que un estudiante continúe yendo hacia ese profesor. Entonces se empieza a considerar que esa es la estructura de la enseñanza del yoga. Y el profesor dice que también la sociedad es activa, es dinámica, se transforma también, y que también es posible que otras personas se interesen más por volver a esa raíz de los elementos del yoga, para que haya esa transición que es posible a entender el yoga no solo como un aspecto físico, como hoy en día, desafortunado decirlo, se ha entendido el yoga.
Okay, so thank you so much. Hi, Nina. Thank you. Greetings to United States. Thank you for joining us. Moving to the next question, I will say in Spanish. Teniendo en cuenta al abuelo del maestro aquí presente, el legendario T. Krishnamacharya y el padre de K.V. Sikachar, creemos que hay diferencias en la forma en que cada uno de ellos se aproximaron a los yamas y niyamas. Pero viviendo en esta época actual, algunos de los yamas y niyamas podrían estar perdiendo interés o importancia. En su opinión, ¿cuál cree que de estos yamas y niyamas debería ser más enfatizado hoy en día para nuestra sociedad? Los yamas son los comportamientos hacia la sociedad, los niyamas son los comportamientos o actitudes hacia nosotros mismos, para que tengan un poco de contexto. So, teacher, having in mind your grandfather, the legendary T. Krishnamacharya, and your father, T.K.V. Sikachar, we believe there are differences in the way each of them approach the yamas and niyamas. But living in this current epoch, some of the yamas and niyamas could be losing ground. In your opinion, which of these should be embraced nowadays?
Okay, I will come to that answer, but can you tell me which of the yama and niyama, in your opinion, is losing ground?
Well, for me, one of the most losing ground is Satyam. People are lying all the time. Like it's terrible, and the honesty is losing everywhere. For me, it's the most.
I don't believe that any of the yama and niyama can be compromised or is less important now than before. I think it's even more relevant that we follow yama and niyama. But the circumstance of societies, we are moving away from the yama and niyama. This I agree. But that's why the relevance of the yama and niyama is very important. And I would say that all of the yama and the niyamas are definitely very, very important. There is nothing that I can see which of the 10 of the 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, the 10 of them together, that has lesser value today. I don't see that. I feel that all of them are very, very relevant. When you look at ahimsa, the first one, if you look at how violent our society has become now, there is conflict everywhere. It's not only in the Russia and Ukraine that there is conflict. There is conflict everywhere in the world. If you come to India, we have conflict with Pakistan, where there is conflict in between China and Taiwan, China and America. If you go to Latin America, there is conflict with all the drug cartels. There is a lot of himsa that is happening in the world. And therefore, ahimsa is very, very important. The same way with satyam, the same way with asteya, the same way with brahmacharya, the same way with aparigraha. I don't think that there is any of the yama or the niyama that is less relevant today. Um, it's perhaps, I don't feel that there is a difference between the way yama and niyama were interpreted at that time and how it should be interpreted now. But of course, how the society will embrace these will be different, because the starting point of where we are teaching about yama and niyama is very different. Like I said, in the old days, people were already teaching about yama and niyama when we were young. Nowadays, many schools, many societies don't want this kind of education at that age. They just leave it for later. Very few people actually talk about these things. And I think that is why we have to emphasize that all the yama and niyama are somehow integrated into the young people, and that is the hope for humanity.
Bueno, el profesor nos responde esta pregunta diciendo que él cree que ninguno de los yamas y niyamas para él pueden estar perdiendo relevancia en nuestro contexto actual.
O todos están perdiendo relevancia.
O todos pueden estar perdiendo, pero él enfatiza en que continúan siendo importantes y que si son recibidos de un profesor, él debería enfatizar mucho en este proceso constructivo de ahimsa, asteya, satyam.
Ahimsa, que es no violencia. Hoy en día vemos que hay mucha violencia y mucho conflicto en todo el mundo, no solamente Rusia, Ucrania, en India también, con Pakistán, en Latinoamérica, el problema de violencia que tenemos con los carteles de drogas, China con Estados Unidos. Entonces, ahimsa es otro, hay mucho himsa, que es violencia hoy en día, y por lo tanto también el satya, que es la verdad, está también muy escaso hoy en día. Hay muchas mentiras, mucha corrupción, muchas cosas que no se apegan a la verdad. Entonces, ninguno de los yamas y niyamas son menos relevantes hoy en día. Al contrario, siguen siendo muy relevantes y muy importante que los empecemos a aplicar en nuestras vidas, porque están generalmente casi todos perdiendo relevancia en la vida actual, y por eso estamos en este momento de sufrimiento.
Okay, very, very nice answer, teacher. But you mentioned that the difference between how your grandfather and your father interpreted yamas and niyamas, because they live in a different times. But I believe for your father, Tiki Sikachar, I am not so sure, but I read in the Heart of Yoga, the book, something about, he emphasizes something in that few yamas and niyamas that we need to keep attention more during these times. And if you have to pick some that we really need to enforce, which ones will be? I know you believe in the importance of all, but
Yeah, but if if I have to pick one of the yama and one of the niyama, I would pick ahimsa as the one for the yama and Ishvara pranidhana for the niyama. This is my view. I feel that these will fundamentally, if we have these two, all the others will be covered.
Okay.
thank you. So, entonces le preguntábamos al profesor que, pues teniendo en cuenta que la relevancia de todos es importante, pues que cuál él escogería como los más significativos si tuviésemos realmente que vernos en la necesidad de embarcarnos en uno solo. Entonces él decía que el principio de la no violencia para él en los yamas sería muy importante, y en los niyamas sería Isvara Pranidhana, que esos ayudarían a construir
¿Pero
los
qué
otros.
es Isvara Pranidhana?
Ishvara Pranidhana,
No, en español.
Ishvara Pranidhana sería como esa entrega hacia esa luz en tu corazón, como una humildad profunda en ti. Tal vez desde ahí se construiría.
Okay, thank you, teacher. Thank you so much for this insight.
Yes.
Moving to the next question. Well, I think this is a very long answer, but like having like a short answer for this. How Ashtanga yoga practices can clean the impurities of our system? Estoy preguntando al profe cómo las prácticas de Ashtanga yoga, en una respuesta muy concisa, podrían limpiar esas impurezas en nuestro sistema.
So,
I know, teacher, sorry.
the thing I want to say is that the impurities does not mean like literal impurities, but it more means our karmic toxins in the form of kleshas, in the form of all those kind of afflictions that we have. So when we start, there are two approaches, two answers I can give in this. One is energetic. Now, we have a belief in the yoga tradition that if there is a toxin, there will be a blockage. If there is a blockage, there is a toxin. That's simple. It's like we don't know which comes first or which is what, but this is out. And it literally happened. I can give you a literal example. A few days ago, I had a problem in my shower in the bathroom where the water was not draining very easily. So I have to call the plumber. And he do something and the blockage removed and my bathroom became clean because the blockage is removed. Now I asked him what was blocking. He says, I don't know. He put some chemical bomb inside the pipe, and obviously that chemical did something, and the blockage was removed, and therefore water flows smoothly. It's the same theory in terms of prana and our toxin. Now, when we start to practice the Ashtanga yoga, prana starts to move more freely. And therefore, when prana starts to move more freely, the toxins obviously have disappeared. We don't know what the toxins are because it has come from our ancestors as well. So, but what does it matter? If the toxins are removed, we are happy because what has changed, we don't know. But that something has changed, we will realize.
Great, teacher.
That's one part of the answer. There's another part to it as well, but I will wait for you to translate this.
Thank you, teacher.
Sí, el profesor nos responde que pues tenemos los seres humanos toxinas en nuestro sistema por previas acciones o por las acciones humanas que tenemos.
Él
que
no se
hacemos.
refiere más que todo a toxinas físicas, ¿no? No estar intoxicados en el cuerpo, sino otras toxinas a nivel kármico, a nivel mental, a nivel subconsciente.
Sí, y que el modelo Ashtanga Yoga, cuando se empieza a practicar estas herramientas de Patanjali, pues ayudan a que el prana empiece a mover libremente en nuestro sistema. Por eso hay toda esta estructura que debe seguirse desde un inicio, como una base que va elevándose en ti con una práctica constante de Ashtanga Yoga, de estas herramientas de Ashtanga Yoga. Y nos daremos cuenta cuando sintamos que esas toxinas se han liberado. El profesor, por ejemplo, mencionaba que en su año tuvo un bloqueo y él tuvo que llamar al plomero y que él le ayudó a liberar este bloqueo en el flujo del agua. Él no supo cuál había sido el inconveniente, solamente que se bloqueó. Y así mismo sucede en nuestro sistema. Los bloqueos están y hay que liberarlos.
Pero no somos conscientes de ellos, ¿sí? O sea, no sabemos, si tengo un bloqueo aquí en esta parte energética o en este chakra o lo que sea, sino que simplemente esos bloqueos se van purificando, se van limpiando con la práctica de las herramientas del yoga, de Ashtanga Yoga, y lo que sentimos es plenitud, felicidad, y es cuando esos bloqueos pues se han eliminado, pero no sabemos exactamente cuáles son, porque pueden venir de nuestros ancestros, pueden venir de nuestro subconsciente, entonces no somos plenamente conscientes de qué toxinas tenemos y de qué bloqueos tenemos, entonces por eso las herramientas de Ashtanga Yoga lo que nos brindan es eso, el movimiento del prana fluido, y eso es lo que nos da esa sensación de bienestar en cuanto a eso. Please, teacher.
In another way, there is a sequence of causality in our life, which is explained by Patanjali, that there is in the first stage, there is what is called jnana, knowledge, that creates an ichcha, a wish for us. And that ichcha creates the action, that ichcha initiates the action. That action has a consequence. That consequence leaves a residual feeling in us. And this is a cycle. So if our karma is originating before an action, there are two stages, and one of them is basically, the first one is jnana. And therefore, if that jnana is somehow clarity rather than non-clarity, then the whole cycle that follows after becomes more refined. And that is why what Ashtanga Yoga is doing is that it eventually leads us to what is called the state of samadhi, which will give us clarity the moment it's not about information knowledge, it's about awareness, it's about wisdom, it's about clarity. And that's what Patanjali calls as prajna. So in yoga philosophy, we believe that samadhi leads to what is called ritambhara prajna, a clarity that is completely clean. And it only comes as a consequence of samadhi, not before. Therefore, the Ashtanga Yoga leads us to this samadhi, which gives us this clarity. That clarity is the jnana. Ritambhara prajna is a jnana, the knowledge, that can initiate a new cycle of actions with greater clarity. Like, let's say we are doing something for many years in a wrong way. Mm-hmm. Somebody comes and says, hey, you know what, you're doing this in the wrong way. Try this way. This is the problem. That's why it's not working. The moment we change it, everything follows very smoothly. That is what samadhi does. It gives us clarity. But for samadhi to happen, we need the Ashtanga Yoga to bring us to that state.
Beautiful. Please, teacher, go ahead.
So that's why it's almost like we are cleaning the river at its source. Because if there is a pollutant at the source, the whole river will be affected by the pollution. Therefore, we have to go to the source to remove that pollution, and that is where the jnana, that is the first part of our causality of our life actions. If we can refine that source, that knowledge, then all that will follow will have lesser toxins. And that is why our toxins in our system will also be removed in that way.
Yeah, thank you, teacher. Entonces el profesor nos menciona que hay un principio de causalidad, es casi como un proceso cíclico. Al inicio deberíamos tener un previo conocimiento de nuestras, digamos, acciones, y que cuando tenemos ese conocimiento de nuestras acciones, entonces podemos empezar a tener un estado de claridad. Y el modelo Ashtanga Yoga nos ayuda a ir interpretando ese conocimiento, esas acciones, para tener un proceso de claridad, que es lo que se definiría al final como samadhi, que es un principio como de una sabiduría, como una claridad que es
Interior.
completamente limpia, es una sabiduría interior. Y ese es un continuo proceso cíclico. Y es así como el modelo Ashtanga Yoga podría ayudarnos a limpiar impurezas. Entonces él metafóricamente se refiere como a un río, y hay que ir al origen de aquello que está causándole impurezas al río. Puede ser en su nacimiento. Entonces hay que tener pleno conocimiento cuáles son las acciones que se están tomando para que el río esté limpio, puro, como sería, digamos, ese proceso de refinamiento del conocimiento. Very nice answer, teacher.
So before moving to our last question, I would like to have of course, a question from the audience, from Niraj. Niraj is asking, how does Patanjali's classical yoga stand in relation to Hatha Yoga? Entonces Niraj está preguntando cómo el yoga clásico de Patanjali tiene una relación con el conocido Hatha Yoga.
I think Patanjali's yoga is the ultimate reference of yoga. The Hatha Yoga tradition is a later tradition that started perhaps in the 600s or 700s AD, and it is what we would call a tantric tradition that is not based on the Vedic principles completely. Patanjali's yoga is a Vedic tradition that is completely based on the Vedic principles. It does not mean that Hatha yoga does not have value. It has value. However, Hatha yoga is something that will leave karmic impressions. Because Patanjali's yoga is Vedic, anything that is Vedic is something that will not leave karmic impressions. And that is why the Vedic traditions, the Vedic philosophies are considered at a higher place in the hierarchy of all the teachings that have come from India. Compared to tantric approach, the Vedic approach is considered much more important because it leaves no karmic impressions, whereas tantric approach leaves karmic impressions. So in a certain way, you have to clean after that. And that is why Hatha Yoga schools also say that the purpose of Hatha Yoga is for us to lead us to Raja Yoga, because sometimes Raja Yoga is not so, the Patanjali's yoga, it was not so accessible to everybody. Therefore, it was like a ladder that took them closer.
Wow, great question.
So I hope you're happy with the answer, Niraj. Very interesting, actually.
He has to be, because there is no other answer.
I think it's processing.
Yes, but teacher, allow me to say with the previous question, when you mentioned the word cyclic, so that means that Ashtanga should be practiced continuously because we are all the time facing this challenge of knowledge and karmic and actions and
Yeah.
toxins. So,
The moment we, let's say we reach samadhi and we think that, oh, you know, I know this knowledge, and this can create an ego, and therefore we fall again. So that's why we have to, even if we have achieve higher states, we need to continue to practice because we should not fall from the higher states. Because remember, falling from a lower place is less painful than falling from a higher place.
bueno, entonces le preguntábamos al profesor que esa respuesta a ese proceso cíclico que uno tiene de un refinado conocimiento cuando es consciente de los inconvenientes que uno se enfrenta, que cuando uno llega a ese estado de claridad hay que ser consciente de que tu ego no se siente, tu ego no se sienta, pues, tome dominancia en ti, porque puedes caer también desde muy alto y es preferible caer desde un lugar más bajo, pero que hay que ser consciente de que esto es una práctica continua.
Con mucho gusto, Rolando. Espero que estés contento con las traducciones. No somos profesionales, nos disculpamos por eso, pero lo importante es que estén aprendiendo y disfrutando de esta entrevista. So teacher, moving to the last question. Bueno, teniendo control de nuestros sentidos como un enlace entre lo más tangible, Vaihanga Sadhana, a lo más sutil, Antaranga Sadhana. Y si esto es una apreciación correcta, ¿por qué Pratyahara no está, Pratyahara, que es el proceso de abstraernos o abstraer los estímulos externos, ¿por qué no está siendo bien desarrollado para ayudar en el proceso de la meditación? ¿Y por qué hay una falta de conocimiento de los profesores de yoga? So having control of our senses is a link from the gross, Bahiranga Sadhana, to subtle Antaranga Sadhana. If this is an appropriate appreciation, why Pratyahara is not well developed to help in meditation process? Is there some lack of knowledge from the yoga teachers?
I don't know if I want to say that there is a lack of knowledge in the yoga teachers. I don't know if that is the right answer to say, but what I would say is the reason is very simple. We are living in a sensory, consumer minded world. So we are bombarded with so many products from so many different directions that sensory control is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And I think that is the problem. We are living in a very materialistic society now all over the world where consumption is considered the greatest thing. So, how can we practice pratyahara when we are bombarded by all these kind of things? That's one dimension of it. Another dimension is that we live in a world that is run by money, economics. So even yoga schools, to survive, they have to find ways to enhance their capacity to raise money. And therefore, even yoga schools have to start selling products like yoga mat, yoga t-shirt, yoga this, yoga that. So how can the yoga school teach pratyahara when there is an interest of selling more products? So there is something that is forgotten. I would not say that it is a lack of knowledge, but I would just say that it does not suit the interest of the society that we are living in, and that is why we are having this issue.
Yes.
Yes.
Bueno, hablábamos de la anterior pregunta y pues por supuesto Pratyahara, el tratar de abstraernos de los estímulos externos hoy en día es muy, muy difícil porque precisamente vivimos en un mundo muy lleno de sensorialidad. Es muy sensorial, tenemos demasiados estímulos a nuestro alrededor, por lo tanto, practicar Pratyahara, que es el abstraernos de esos estímulos externos, es cada vez más difícil en la sociedad actual. Entonces, por lo tanto, es como que se sale de control. Y además, por supuesto, estamos viviendo en un mundo muy materialista, muy enfocado en el dinero y por lo tanto también incluso el yoga se ha visto afectado por esto o las escuelas de yoga se han visto afectadas por esto y no se enfatiza en la sociedad, ¿sí? No se enfatiza en el ser humano, sino que ahora, por supuesto, las escuelas de yoga estamos también preocupadas por ver cómo podemos generar dinero porque es la vida que nos ha tocado, tenemos todos que pagar cuentas, tenemos que sobrevivir, y pues desafortunadamente el dinero es el medio, entonces se ha vuelto también casi un producto el yoga, ¿sí? Que el yoga mat, que el yoga... la camisa, que el profesor de yoga también se vende como un producto, el mismo profesor de yoga. Entonces es eso de la sensorialidad y el dinero.
But yeah, thank you for that answer, teacher. But within the, let's say, teacher, within the yoga practice itself, with the teacher in front of you, it's difficult to get a touch of Pratyahara within the practice. But how we can work little by little to build up this moment of leave the sensories. This is the problem.
There are practices for Pratyahara like Trataka, Shanmukhi Mudra, etc., Shambhavi Mudra, etc., which are considered the ways in which we develop the Pratyahara practices. The Drishtis, for example, Nasagra Drishti, Bhrumatya Drishti, etc., they are considered as the way we are practicing Pratyahara.
Okay.
Drishtis are integrated in asana practice, in pranayama practice. So, if of course it can be taught in even nowadays modern yoga circumstances. But all this will only be helpful if we start these practices very young. Because the problem with Pratyahara is that sensory objects are not just objects. They are somehow part of our emotional, psychological structure. Like take food, for example. Food is a very sensual object. Now, food is very emotional object for many people. It can remind people of childhood memories. It can remind people of traumatic memories, etc. So when you start practicing the Pratyahara later, it's possible that it wakes up certain traumas associated with us. It's certain disturbances that are connected to that. And these are things that many people don't want to deal with in today's society because as an adult, there is responsibilities that they want to focus on. Therefore, they don't want to spend time in dealing with these problems. That's why in the old days, Pratyahara was taught when we were still like teenagers, etc., when we were growing in the ashram of the teacher, not in the modern day ashrams, that is all very dangerous, but in the old days, you were growing up with a teacher from the time you were 7, 8 years old. You had a very safe and secure relationship with the teacher's family, etc. And so it's a very different circumstance when you are taught these kind of practices than now. This is very, very important.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer, teacher. And el profesor nos dice que, pues, realmente sí hay técnicas dentro de una práctica de yoga que siguen el
Para
modelo
estimular
Ashtanga Yoga
pratyahara,
para estimular pratyahara.
como trataka,
Entonces hay algunas técnicas como Trataka,
drishti.
Drishtis, Sanmukhi Mudra, que estas técnicas ayudan a aislar un poco los sentidos para entrar a unos procesos más
Son técnicas muy tangibles.
muy tangibles, exactamente. Y entonces el profesor pues dice que esto hay que iniciarlo desde antes, desde más jóvenes, para que muchas de esas emociones que se puedan despertar del pasado, pues no nos saquen de ese estado previo a un estado de meditación. Y que pues ahí es donde está digamos, el reto de iniciar este modelo Ashtanga Yoga desde más jóvenes. Aunque si estamos a una edad madura, pues también podríamos desarrollarlo, pero va a ser un poco más difícil. Well, teacher, it has been 1 hour, 10 minutes with you, 11 minutes, sorry. So thank you so much for your time. It is a bit late for you now, 9:40, so you are going to bed soon, I hope. So we are ending this conversation.
Thank you everybody for joining us. Muchas gracias a todos por unirse a esta conversación siempre tan constructiva, de que aprendemos mucho con el profesor, disfrutamos mucho siempre estas conversaciones y disfrutamos mucho también de ustedes y de su compañía y de sus mensajes. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much everybody for being here. We enjoy very much your company, your questions, your commentaries. Unfortunately, always time is very short, but hopefully we can do another one in some time. So thank you so much, teacher. Thank you so much, everybody. It's late for the teacher, so we will just let him rest. But of course, we would like to please ask for a last chanting to finish.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
We will do a small peace chant. Om Tachayovaravranimahe Gatay Yajnaya Gatay Yajnapataye Daivi Swastirastu Nah Swasthirmanushebhyah Odhvanjighatu bheshajam Shanno asto dvipade Shan chatushpade Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste.
Namaste, teacher. Thank you
Namaste.
so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful chat.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.